Hey, Philip, welcome to the show, my man.
Nice to be here. Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah, no, it's fun. This is something we've been trying to do. And what I'm psyched is we're recording this for Machine Learning Day. And there's nothing better than having someone who's been a, like an independent contributor data scientist to now a data science manager and how that changes as well. So I think we've got a lot to talk about on ML Day. But I think it's always good to start with you. Like, tell us about the journey. Like, how did you get started into this, and how you doing through COVID?
Well, those are two kind
Yeah,
of big
big
questions,
matzo
but
balls.
sure. How did I get started? Well, I got started doing computational physics many years ago as an undergraduate. I had a summer project. I was doing some modeling work for modeling convection inside of the Earth, in the Earth's core, actually. I learned
That's what I did
Fortran that
during my
summer.
summer.
Yeah, I learned like Fortran and was doing these like pretty intensive numerical simulations, and somehow I liked that, and that launched me into a career in, well, first physics, but I took some left turns. So yeah, I went to grad school, and I thought for a moment that I wanted to be an experimentalist. I thought working in a basement lab in the dark every day sounded like a good idea until it didn't. And then decided I wanted to work in front of a computer again. So I ended up, I found a professor who was working on speech recognition algorithms
Okay.
that were inspired by ideas out of neuroscience. And I thought that sounded like a pretty cool idea.
Yeah.
And I ended up doing that for my PhD work, and got to the end of that, and knew I liked doing computation. Knew I had enjoyed a lot of the kind of machine learning aspects of my work in grad school. Didn't really know how that fit into the industry, and then that buzzword title data scientist came floating by, and I heard about this program, the data incubator, which was targeted at people like me who came from PhD backgrounds and wanted to make a foray into industry. And that was how I sort of got trained up on some of the current tool set most in demand by employers, and landed my first data science job. So that's really how I came to data science.
Well, I want to go into what I want to jump in here. Tell me about that summer program. How old were you? How did you get to that program? And the reason why I ask is there's so many people that listen to this that have children that are at that age also of trying to be data enthusiasts. So how did you at the time get into that program? How did you find it? It doesn't seem like too many. I don't know. You tell me. How did you get there?
As an undergraduate?
No, at that summer program that you said when you were trying to do the exploratory work. Was that were you an undergraduate at that, or that was a little bit before college?
So that was as an undergraduate. Yep. So
undergrad. So how'd you find it?
So that I was undergrad at Yale. I was a physics major, and that was a pretty common thing, is that a lot of people hung around in the summer and tried to find research experience. So just literally like send emails out to professors and say, hey, do you have any grant money for like someone to work over the summer? And and just so happened to find this lab in the geology department that sounded like interesting work. So and that was just sort of the start. I had taken a few computer programming courses at that time, and it seemed to fit into some of what I was interested in. So a little more of the backstory. I ended up doing my senior thesis at Yale on that geophysics work, and then I took a year. I taught high school physics actually in Hong Kong for a year, and then found my way back to the Yale geology department. And in a gap year before I started grad school, I worked with a different professor doing atmospheric physics for a year, and that was more like a data munging, sort of like data visualization, statistics, working with experimental data, which also I think was a valuable way to start building some of the data science toolkit through that work as well. So I definitely had some opportunities to do that research work prior to grad school that I think helped me understand where my interests lie.
What's great about that story is It just doesn't ever change. If you want to find a job, you have to hunt. You need to be creative, right? You need to go out there. It's still so many people just feel like the world is going to come to them. So I mean, I love that story. It's, that day that you sent out all those notes that took you on a journey, and it wound and it wound and it went to all these places. You miss Hong Kong?
Yeah, I really enjoyed the year there. It's been kind of crazy watching from a distance all of the turmoil in the news over the last couple of years. But yeah, I found it to be a really welcoming place, very kind of accessible for someone from my background to go. And a fair number of people spoke English, and I worked at an international school where was able to speak English for my day job. And yeah, it was just a great platform for exploring a lot of Asia. It was kind of fun working at an international school. We had both kind of the American holidays and the Chinese holidays. And so I had to take off for a long weekend to Thailand or to Nepal or to somewhere on mainland China. Really got to do a lot of fun exploration that year. So yeah, that was a great experience, especially for that first year out of college.
Now, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was the difference really between a manager looking at data and maybe a frontline individual contributor. So, I mean, a couple ways we can have this conversation. One is maybe the advice you'd give your younger self when you were in that program, munging data, versus how you would handle that now. You pick this up wherever you want, but I think it's a very good conversation because you've played both hats. And I don't know which one you like better.
Well, sure. Certainly the experience as a manager, I mean, it has felt like sort of a natural transition for me coming from more of like a technical leadership position to, I guess, managing people. There's a few new kind of curveball elements that have come out in the last year. But yeah, I guess for advice for like young data scientists, especially people coming from my background from academia, keep an eye on like what skills you're building for the future. So much of my work in academia was in MATLAB,
Yep.
and you don't see too much MATLAB work in the private sector or like private industry, so fortunately I was able to pick up some Python in grad school, and that transition was fairly easy. I got some of that training of how to do everything I used to know how to do in MATLAB and Python through the data incubator after the PhD. But just keeping an eye on what the future could be, right? So many people go into an academic program thinking that they're going to be a professor or they're going to be a postdoc after grad school, and
Right.
Some people do go on that track, but there's just a limited number of jobs, and really looking at so many of my colleagues from grad school are now data scientists, and having an idea of what that is and what are the skills required and kind of what you might want to learn to set yourself up for that, I think could be really useful. But again, to your point, I didn't have any idea that this was going to be the path. And certainly those early experiences I had with research really, I did build a lot of important skills that came to be relevant down the line. So
what I've learned in working with PhDs who are from academia, now going to the professional or enterprise world, is a few things. One of the strongest communicators and presenters. I feel like you put a PhD who's gone through that in front of a customer, they know how to communicate. They know how to write. I think sometimes they index to too much research. So I think there's this balance. But I think it's just in all that work of how to get grants, how to get funded, how to present. There is just really strong communicators. And I think that it's unfortunate that so many people leave academia to go into maybe enterprise, because from what I understand, is it's hard to go back. Like once you leave certain programs, that's a big decision. You can't go, whoops, I made a mistake. All right. Very few teachers or professors can come back. There's not all, but just for the majority, that's what I heard. And what have you heard, or what have you seen?
Yeah, in general, that's true. There's it's a very narrow path to get to a tenure track position, and even to get tenure as a professor in academia. You have to do everything right. You have to come out of your PhD program with like a strong set of publications. You have to get the right postdoc that's going to find you the right connections to get your next, job. And, at each stage along the way, so many people get peeled off, and you have to just play your cards exactly right to hit that bullseye and get all the way through. And so, yeah, once you sort of jump off that track, it is fairly difficult to get back on, although some people have found ways to do it.
I had a guest on who was a high-ranking Kaggle competitor, and I said, why are you on Kaggle? Tell me that journey. And he said, no one is reading my PhD paper, so I figured the only way people are going to know who I am is I have to compete and write, because that's the second part, is you write this great paper that you spent your nights, weekends, hearts, blood, sweat, tear. Very few people will read it, but you win a Kaggle competition, everyone knows you and maybe will read some of it. It's crazy world.
Yeah, different avenues towards fame. Yeah, that's interesting as a perspective. I've never been very deep into the Kaggle world.
Yeah.
Some of my perspective there is that, some of those competitions end up being fairly unrealistic for like the type of work that you'll do as a practicing data scientist. Because like basically in Kaggle, right? Someone hands you the clean data set, says like, here's exactly what I want you to do. Here's exactly how you'll measure the outcome.
Yep.
And then you spend all your time like ensembling models together to get like that 0.001% performance at the end.
Well said.
As a practicing data scientist, right? Half the problem is just like, where do I find the data? How do I clean it up? How do I even figure out what problem I'm trying to solve? All the things that would have to do prior to starting the Kaggle style competition. So
right. Chasing fame. Yeah. Chasing fame. I think, it was just so interesting on like what he said, why. I didn't know the why, but to your point, he's like, no one's reading my work. So now on Machine Learning Day, this is what we're celebrating a little bit today. I think I always think of a challenge of the machine learning. So for me, if we think about this today, but I really want to make this the national holiday 5 years from now, like Amazon Prime Day, Valentine's Day, like this is our day. For people who are not in the PhD program, people are just understand how a phone works barely. Like, what ML should they do? What's the challenge we should give them? What's the test that we can get everyone excited about the positive potential instead of all the wah, what could go wrong? Yeah, things could go wrong, but what should we celebrate?
What should we celebrate? I mean, one thing to celebrate is just like how accessible machine learning tools are through open source now to everyone to try at home, right? Just about anyone can, get Python on your laptop and open up a Jupyter notebook, install, scikit-learn, and make your own machine learning model. Like, it takes like 10 lines of code, which, people wrote entire PhDs 20 years ago that, a beginner bootcamp, data scientist can solve immediately, in like a few lines of scikit-learn code. So I think that's like one thing to celebrate. In terms of like a challenge to take on, I don't know, that's a trickier question. So much of it comes down to finding like data sets that you're interested in. You like find some data, explore it, and say, I wonder if I could predict this variable from these other variables, and then sort of like start the ideation process that way.
Well, I think there's some correct is do the work, right? That's the challenge of find the data set, clean the data. Just the other one is, I'm going to give you my hacks, right? The other one is embrace voice to text, or embrace your email that auto fills your sentences. Just take a moment just to embrace how amazing that is. Like when you start writing a sentence, when you start filling in a word, I just think these little things that we now take for granted, I think they're beautiful.
Yeah, it's really pervasive now, in a way that people don't really appreciate the depth of the technology that enables you to say like, "Hey Siri," and then you just go. Both from like recognizing that keyword through like, just constantly like listening to everything you say until like, here's the keyword. That's a whole problem in itself. Entire PhD have been written around, to actually understanding what you're saying, to like coming up with a reasonable response to what you're saying, to give you the information that you want.
Good point. Chatbots, just like I forgot, like those chatbots on websites. How can I help you? Customer support. Oh, support. You said support. Blah blah blah. Like, just, gosh, you're right. I mean, there's just a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Yeah, it's a lot to celebrate.
Mm-hmm. So I mean, yeah, people will get very focused on like the gaps, right, where it falls short, right? Because so often I'm in the car, I'm talking to Siri, and she hears the wrong thing, and so we're not yet to human performance, but be careful what you ask for. That's where the sort of the negative aspects come in. But
well, I think that's a good place to even talk about what IronNet's doing. I mean, you guys are doing some cool stuff. I don't know if you also now want to talk a little bit about what you can talk about, what you're working on, or what excites you.
Sure, absolutely. Well, yeah, IronNet, obviously it's a cybersecurity company. I had no prior experience in cybersecurity before coming to IronNet, but it's really an interesting mix of people from academic backgrounds, people from sort of tech startup backgrounds. We are kind of a late stage tech startup, and then people from the government and the NSA and the like other 3-letter agencies who have really deep cybersecurity experience. And it's really just putting our heads together and trying to solve this giant problem that the world has right now of cybersecurity. We see it all over in the news, just in the the past week with the pipeline attack, and recently with SolarWinds, and it's just pervasive. And machine learning can play a huge role in solving this problem, because essentially what we have to do is, the only way to combat these kind of attacks is to look at data and to find the needle in the haystack and find when people are doing bad things. And that's really IronNet's mission. So, we go into customers, either private enterprises or even government agencies, and they will install our software and use it to detect potentially malicious activities on their networks. And so, so much of the machine learning that we do goes into that initial detection problem of, given this large amount of data, how do we use supervised and unsupervised learning techniques to either find anomalies or things that resemble known malicious behaviors in the data. But then we're also working on kind of a next level solution to this problem, which is really implementing the vision of our founder, General Keith Alexander, who is the former head of the NSA and commander of US Cyber Command. The idea being, like, almost everywhere, everyone is trying to solve this problem in isolation, right? Each company, each enterprise is just working on its own. They're not really sharing data. They're not sharing information with each other, and all the attackers are. And so there's really this asymmetry where, we're losing the battle because we're not willing to cooperate. And so IronNet is trying to provide tools for collaboration in cybersecurity, where not only will we find something that's suspicious in your network, but we'll also give you visibility of where we found similar things across an industry or a geographical region, and put those pieces together to where we can work together.
I love it. I'm a fan. Fascinating. Now I know why you sit in Virginia for some reason. Well, listen, I loved having you on the show. Easy to see why you're a success at all the little things that you've done. I'm vaccinated 2 shots, and when I start traveling again and I get up there, I'd love to have a drink with you. It'll be good to finally get out. I was in San Francisco. I did the exodus from San Francisco to Miami. I think late summer I'll start traveling, and you're someone I want to meet. So I appreciate you giving me time.
Well, thanks for having me here, and it's great to meet you.
And welcome. Thanks for being on the show, and thanks for being part of Machine Learning Day. I think there's a lot we're doing, and this is a brand that you should check out on Machine Learning Day.